YNW Melly's friend since the 6th grade named Adrian Davis just saved his life and is gonna help him get released from jail, revealing the first alibi for YNW Melly so far throughout his trial, as the opening question reveals that YNW Melly wasn't even at the crime scene.
Are you 100% sure that Melly got into the red Mitsubishi to go home?
Yes.
Are you 100% sure that this young man learned of his friends at the exact same time you learned of it?
Yes.
And that was at the house?
Yes.
Are you 100% sure that when people were getting on the phone, that this young man was looking for his phone to call people?
Yes.
Adrian Davis just revealed YNW Melly exited the Jeep that he was driving in with Bortland, Sack Chaser, and Juvie, and he was picked up by the red vehicle halfway home. The red vehicle at the recording studio needed somebody with house keys so then they can enter the YNW crib.
Okay, so the only two people you know who had a key to the house was this young man
Yes.
and Cortland Henry.
Yes.
Did you see this young man unlock the door of the house?
Yes.
Who was the last person to get out of the red Mitsubishi to go inside the house?
Trayvon, he was in the cot still asleep.
Did you see where Melly went?
To his room.
And where was his bedroom?
When you first walked in the house, it can't miss it, it's right down the left.
Okay. This is a 1 or 2 story house?
2.
It's still unknown where YNW Bortland, Juvie, and Sack Chaser were heading to the point where they needed to drop YNW Melly off with the others, although Anthony Davis does claim that YNW Melly was seen walking to the front door of the YNW crib. He was opening the door, and then Anthony watched him walk straight into his bedroom to go to sleep. With YNW Melly and everyone else in the house sleeping for roughly an hour or two, members inside of the house would begin screaming, yelling for everyone to wake up as they just learned what happened to Juvie and Sack Chaser.
Did there come a time in the early morning hours that you were woken up and heard some distressing news?
Yes.
What did you hear?
That second Julie.
When you heard that, did you see Melly in the house?
Yes.
Did you see Melly how he was dressed in the house?
Yes.
What was he wearing?
Shorts and a t-shirt, I think.
Anthony Davis saw YNW Melly inside of the house, waking up out of bed with a t-shirt and shorts on when learning about the quote drive-by. This is breaking information if he is telling the truth, which is a big if. However, David would continue sharing what was happening inside of the YNW crib as they were all learning the news about Sack Chaser and Juvie at the same time.
Upon hearing that Sack and Juvie were what did you guys do?
We were already dressed and stuff, so we just left with Fredo's house.
Was anybody upset or crying?
Yeah, we all were crying.
Was this young man crying?
Yes.
Are you sure of that?
Positive.
And where'd you go?
Fredo's house.
Did there come a time after you got to the house of Fredo Bang that Cortland Henry showed up?
Yes.
Did Cortland Henry tell you what happened?
Yeah, he said it was a drive-by.
Davis mentions how he 100% saw YNW Melly crying inside of the YNW house, showing emotions for what happened to his two best friends when he was learning about the news. The YNW house would then pack up and they would drive over to rapper Fredo Bang's house early on in the morning, hours after the crime, where he mentions that YNW Melly went with them to Fredo Bang's house. However, it's when he mentions YNW Melly's missing cell phone, which starts to answer a lot of the questions that we had.
By the way, when you first learned that Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas at the house with Melly, did anyone get on the phone?
Yeah.
Did anyone have any problem locating their phone?
Yes.
Who was that?
Jamel.
It's all starting to make sense as to why YNW Melly's cell phone was in several different areas when tracked using GPS tracking. It did leave the Jeep when the crime occurred. However, YNW Melly left it inside of the Jeep the crime happened in by accident when he was switching vehicles to the red one.
So now the trial is over and we know that YNW Melly's attorneys had only issued out one witness, this gentleman seen right here, and then basically rested their case. Now some legal analysts have come forward and stated that having this witness as their final witness, specifically YNW Melly, was kind of a brilliant plan. Because having him as the final witness, it basically sealed the deal and solved the mystery of why was YNW Melly's phone all over the place and why was YNW Melly's phone inundated with other image and text messages of his friends. Well, that's because his friends used his phone according to them. And secondly, the reason why YNW Melly, according to his defense, his phone was zipping and zooting all over the city is because, well, when they exchanged vehicles, he left it.
With Anthony Davis doing so well on the stand, revealing that he saw YNW Melly at home when the crime happened, and even remembers picking up YNW Melly on the side of the street, Melly's defense team doesn't need anyone else to testify, and they didn't even need YNW Melly himself to share his side of things either.
And if you don't testify, I'm going to instruct the jury that you have a right not to testify, and they can't consider that, hold that against you. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So my question, I guess, is did you have enough time to talk about this issue about you testifying or not testifying? Did you have enough time to discuss that with your attorneys?
Yes, sir.
Did they answer all your questions?
Yes, sir.
And what is your decision?
I will not testify.
You will not be testifying.
No, sir.
Is anyone forcing you or coercing you to make this decision?
No, sir.
Anybody make any promises or on the contrary, make to get you not to testify?
No, sir.
This is your free and voluntary decision?
Yes, sir.
However, is the one witness enough to cancel out the evidence against YNW Melly that was shared by the prosecutors? Thankfully, Davis did explain why YNW Melly seemed so happy at a recording set hours after the passings of Juvie and Sack Chaser.
You see him? Melly still turned regardless of what happened this early morning. He's still out here being very positive. Turned still. Hey! No, still turned. Regardless of what happened, you already know.
As Davis would mention that YNW Melly was being paid to do this music video. It was a contracted event, meaning he had no other choice but to do it.
Were you aware whether or not Melly had a contractual agreement to do a video that day?
Yeah, it was something like that. I know he probably would have lost a lot of money if he didn't go to the music video. He was upset.
Was Melly crying at Fredo Bang's house?
Yes.
Were you crying?
Yes.
Because you all grew up together.
Yes.
Yeah.
revealing that YNW Melly was just trying to put himself in a good mood so then the video would turn out well, as he had to do this. However, what Anthony Davis couldn't make YNW Melly look better on was when the lead detective on the stand against Melly would reveal this text message to the world.
The PC Gambino account asked him if he was okay, and his response was, "I did that," and placed a smiley face emoji.
And the next message from 10/26/2018 at 16:02 from Eastern Standard Time. The YNW Melly account says what?
After that, SHHHH.
And could you please stay and point on the right side of the screen exactly which part you're saying where the YNW Melly account says, "I did that"?
I did that. This is the thread ID. This is the text. This is the author. And this is the recipient. Then you come down here, same thing. The ID is for the actual message, which is just specific to that one message. Then the thread ID is the actual continuing message.
For more context, hours after the passings in 2018, somebody would message YNW Melly on Instagram asking, "Hey, are you okay? Tell me something." Where YNW Melly would literally reply saying, "I did that," with a happy face emoji. Once this was being shared within the courtroom, YNW Melly would be seen covering his face, looking embarrassed, looking as if he wants to give up. This would also be the last piece of the evidence the prosecution wanted to show the jury, as it makes sense as it makes him look the most guilty.
So the state has officially rested their case on the YNW Melly trial. And starting tomorrow at 9 a.m., Melly's defense team will bring in their witnesses. Now it seems as though Melly's attorneys are going to be offering a very short defense because according to the judge, sometime on Wednesday or Thursday, they're going to be doing their closing arguments and then the jury will be sequestered to finally take the case, which means the jury gets to deliberate and determine whether Melly's going to be found guilty or innocent. Now, Melly's attorneys did file a motion for a judgment of acquittal. So essentially, Melly's attorneys are arguing that the reason why they asked for the motion for a judgment of acquittal is because the prosecutor has a circumstantial based case, but the circumstantial based case is only going to lead the jury to start trying to take that Swiss cheese and fill in those holes themselves. Because the prosecutor, according to Melly's defense, has not offered the jury any substantive evidence to be able to fill those holes.
However, it was time for YNW Melly's lawyers to cross-examine the lead detective, as Melly's lawyers realized this lead detective did some questionable police work to YNW Melly's manager, 100K Track.
Did you, as a trained investigator, Jameson Francois to be deported to Haiti, even though he's been in this country since 5 years?
Yes, sir.
Did you, in fact, that he would not get fed and get any medicine in the jails?
I don't know about that in the conversations.
Do you think a witness who tells you something that you don't like really gets to the truth?
Objection, Your Honor, relevant.
Sustained.
When you questioned Jameson Francois, were you alone or did you bring immigration officers with you?
We were at the Chrome Detention Center, so of course the immigration officers had to be there.
Why this is so important is because 100K Track is the one that gave the lead detective YNW Melly's cell phone. He had no choice or else he would have been kicked out of the United States. That cell phone contains practically 90% of the evidence that the prosecution is using against YNW Melly, such as this text message between Melly and his girlfriend, and if you really read through the lines, shares something concerning.
Moving on to Friday, November 9th, 2029, 20 UTC, 2018. Message from Melly, Montana to, again, that baby. What does that one say?
You don't with me anyways. I peeped it. You can slide, but God knows I wasn't in her and real breaking. You spoiled everything was given to you. You act like some slide. I keep Orton with because
As YNW Melly stated that YNW Bortland did one of the realest things in his life for him and that he would never switch up. I really wonder what that one thing might be. However, this would then lead into the most serious evidence against Melly, which starts with a report of forensic expert Sergeant Williams in the YNW Melly case explains how it couldn't have been a drive-by.
Assignment, which is to determine if this is a drive. And my determination was that this is not a drive-by, and it's based upon this picture here, which is a very good picture to describe it. All of these rounds are done. One is done at a stationary position. The is at a stationary position when all but one of these rounds are going in. The one round that has some movement in it, which is round site L here, the actually moving in that to create the little bit of a that you see there.
Okay, a lot of information in that answer, so let's break it down a little bit. You mentioned so I'm gonna zoom in on site F.
This forensic expert took note of every single hole inside of the car and then used what is called the stick method to find out how the holes were created and where, especially where the direction it came from, as you use an angle and a stick from a certain position and it will match up with the hole perfectly. Sadly, YNW Melly's seat showed a perfect match.
Number, you said 17 outside the car. How many rounds were inside of the car?
3.
And can you exclude the for Mr. Williams and Mr. Thomas as coming from outside of the car?
Yes. From the driver's side back seat.
As to the shot that was Christopher Thomas, where did that come from?
Driver's side back seat.
Okay. Is it possible for there to have been 2 inside that car?
No.
Why not?
There is no time.
So with Sergeant Williams practically guaranteeing that this crime must have happened from the person in the back left seat of the vehicle, they then called YNW Juvie's mother to the stand so then she can confirm where YNW Melly sat inside of the Jeep according to the surveillance at the recording studio, including where her son YNW Juvie sat.
Can you state your name, your full legal name for the jury?
Leon Phillips.
Okay. And are you related to one of the victims in this case?
Yes, I am.
How so?
I'm his mother.
And who is that?
Christopher Thomas.
Positive 21915. Ms. Phillips, did you see who entered into the occupants who entered into that gray Jeep?
Mm-hmm.
And is that a yes?
Yes.
Do you recognize where your son entered that gray Jeep?
Yes.
Which seat, if you can identify for the jury?
He got in the back seat on the right hand side.
Did you recognize the individual that got into the back seat on the left side, the rear driver's side?
Yes.
And who was that individual?
Jamel.
And Jamel, is that the defendant, Jamel Demons?
Yes, ma'am.
With the jury hearing that the crime must have happened from inside of the vehicle, alongside YNW Juvie's mother revealing where YNW Melly was seated, it seemed as if nothing could get worse in this trial for Melly. Well, it ends up getting worse the next day, as we would see a witness named Trayvon Glass take the stand. He was at the recording studio on the night of the crime. However, he is not a friend of YNW Melly's as it was publicized. He's actually a best friend of YNW Juvie. Now, thankfully for Trayvon, he went into the red Jeep that was parked beside YNW Melly's car when leaving the recording studio. According to Trayvon, the plan was for them to go to fellow rapper Fredo Bang's house after they were done. However, the red car arrived at his house. Melly's Jeep never showed up. As Trayvon noticed once arriving at Fredo's house that YNW Melly was there, and he had a change of clothes on when leaving the recording studio.
Okay. Was that the first time you saw Melly after you guys left the studio?
Yeah.
Was Melly wearing the same clothes or different clothes than when you saw him at the studio?
It was a new day. Nah, he wasn't.
Nah, he wasn't. You guys
Wasn't wearing the same clothes.
Okay. Do you recall what he was wearing?
Just had on some shorts.
And
This without a doubt made YNW Melly look very guilty in front of the jury. However, now with Anthony Davis's testimony earlier on today, it now makes sense as to why YNW Melly had a change of clothes. It's because this is what he was sleeping in earlier on in the night. And thankfully in YNW Melly's case, Trayvon would also mention there was no issues between Melly, Sack Chaser, and Juvie at the studio.
You don't know of any friction between Melly and Anthony Davis at the same time?
I don't know.
And you don't know of any friction between Melly and Christopher Thompson?
I don't know.
You didn't see any friction at the studio that night of any magnitude?
I did.
You did?
I didn't.
Okay.
Trayvon was very unprofessional while on the stand during trial, as while he was on the stand, his cell phone continued to get text messages from people that were watching the trial live stream, as his cell phone wouldn't stop vibrating and making noises during the trial as everyone continued texting him, allegedly people telling him that you're saying way too much about YNW Melly.
So Trayvon Glass has been really active on Instagram since he finished his testimony today. So he posted this on Instagram, and you can pause to read it, but in a nutshell, he basically said, "I'm not a rat, and if I am, come and me." And just before he took the witness stand, he posted this image, and it's with Sack Chaser and Juvie in it. So I guess that's in commemoration. I mean, he was friends with these two guys. And then he proceeded to post this video by Charleston White with a caption that says, "Bruh bug." And in the video, Charleston White is basically talking about if you me up, he's going to basically snitch to the prosecutors. So I'm curious as to who Trayvon Glass thinks is going to him up for testifying. Now remember, he did take a phone call while he was in court, and that's when the judge had asked him, basically, who were you talking to? Trayvon had explained it was his brother calling, and he was just concerned about his whereabouts. In my opinion, it sounds like a number of people probably didn't want Trayvon Glass to testify today, so I'm curious as to who it was.
All right, you're looking at me now. All right, thank you. I wasn't here. I left the office, left the bench, come for a recess, came back in, and counsel suggested to me that you're on the phone and you read something and you're discussing something on the phone. Is that true?
It's true.
Yes, so did it have anything to do with this case?
Not at all.
So was it some other business or?
So it's me texting. So,
You were texting?
yeah.
Were you texting about the case?
Not about it.
What were you texting?
Texting saying that this wild. Wow. That's all I said.
I didn't hear you.
I said things are wild. That's all I said.
Things are wild.
It's wild.
Anything else?
That's it.
And did you have a conversation with someone?
My brother called me.
Up until YNW Melly's lawyers put Anthony Davis onto the stand to help out YNW Melly, nothing was going right for Melly. As we would hear a report of, before testimony kicked off Tuesday morning, the court learned YNW Juvie's sister allegedly reached out to Melly's mother, Jamie King, on social media.
What's been going on in the courtroom?
Well, Anjanette, it's been a very interesting morning. It did start off earlier with the defense bringing up an issue. Apparently, Juvie's sister posted on, I guess, one of the social media outlets, and she said that she was going to Jamie King. And so that caused a big, issue in the courtroom. It wasn't anything that we got on tape, but it did happen this morning. It was on the record, and she has a bodyguard now. So that was one of the first issues that the court dealt with this morning. And it was interesting because the judge did basically say, if you needed more security, I can get it for you. Ultimately, it was determined that the security she had, the bodyguard, was going to be enough. So
with hours of investigating, I was able to find the back and forth between Juvie's mom as well as Melly's mom on social media.
Shout out to Reddit because we had to do some digging to find the sister. Now, this is the sister, Ashley Monique. And let me show you the post that she had posted on Facebook because, honey, it was quite the stir. So she posted this screenshot from Jamie King, YNW Melly's mother, and she said, "Pest control, who called about a..." Now, that was in regards to a post made by Trayvon Glass on his Instagram page where he basically said that he's not worried about anything, and if he's come extend him. So in a nutshell, Melly's mom is calling Trayvon Glass a, and Monique replied back and says, "A is when you do something wrong and not take responsibility and then go and set somebody up because you're scared to lay down. She goes on to say that's not the case here. Fetty was Juvie's friend, not Melly. He was only around because Juvie brought him. Now in the comments, somebody says she better find something safe to do. Another person replied back and says, very well said. Another person tagged Jamie and somebody else said, come get. Now, Ashley was in the comments and says, she even has a bodyguard, child. Another person replied and says, yeah, she need one because she's talking like she's 200 pounds and she ain't even pushing 100. Now, somebody else posted this and says, she's going to need them because she in the wrong city talking. Now, I think that when Melly's defense attorneys found this, they submitted it over to the judge and basically was like, Juvie's sister's out here Melly's mom. Now, the judge did state that if Melly's mom needed security, he would issue her security, and then he found out that she had a bodyguard, and that would be sufficient enough.
This was affecting YNW Melly in a massive way during trial. Even his lawyers knew about it, so they were able to speak with the judge and get Melly's mom 24/7 security. This would make YNW Melly look a lot happier, as well as relieved, as it looks like he's wiping tears when his lawyer asks for a hug.
Jury entry? I don't know.